Welcome to the Business of Race podcast, where we explore issues of race and racism, their impacts on businesses, and what employers can do to address these issues to create a more effective working environment for everyone. I'm your host, Regina Newkirk-Rucci, the Director of Equity for 9 Forward. And today, joining us in the conference room, we are blessed to have Dr. Irvin PeDro Cohen, who is the Executive Director of LISC. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
I always want to get into it and talk about all the things, and we will, but I just think sometimes about, we work. What do you like to do on a Saturday?
If I have my options, which I don't often have my own options because I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. So my Saturdays are often theirs. Mm-hmm. But when I do have my options, I like to do absolutely nothing. I like to do nothing, and I generally like to do nothing in silence. So that's about as exciting as I would get on a Saturday. Yeah.
So, that's interesting because I really do love the days when I get to do nothing, but I feel tremendously guilty. I think about all the things that I could, should, would be doing. And so sometimes it's really hard for me to balance that. I don't want to do anything. Even last night when I got home, I was like, I don't feel like doing anything. But then I felt tremendously guilty for all of the work that still needed to be done.
Well, as we were talking before we came on the air, I said that's part of that Jedi mind trick that we have been convinced, particularly those of us who fall in the labor class, that if we do nothing, somehow we are being lazy. And I just have liberated myself from that belief system. And I found it quite spiritual, and I found it quite just replenishing to my system to do nothing and do nothing in silence. But those times that I am working, I am literally all committed to it. Every fiber of my being is committed to my work. And so I think in order for me to do work at a really high level, I have to force myself to do nothing. And in doing that, I found it to be quite refreshing for my spirit, my soul, and for the people that I ultimately wake up every day to serve.
Well, and I need to do that. I mean, because it's replenishment, right? It's rejuvenation. And so you're able to even do those things better and serve those people better and be with those people better when you have those moments of true rest and doing nothing.
And I found that, it's in those moments that I can clearly hear the Creator speaking to me about what it is that I'm tasked with doing. And so in an effort to make sure that I'm in alignment with what I'm spiritually gifted to do, I found it very, 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 very necessary for me to be able to just take some time out and just do nothing.
Well, you may have me in my hammock this weekend doing nothing. I'm going to have to embrace that, receive that, and embrace that.
That's what I'm talking about.
I love it.
That's what I'm talking about.
All right. So we move into the agenda topic today. We talk about race and equity issues on the show.
Right.
And so this one's a little interesting. I don't think it's one that people would normally think about.
Right.
But we think about the greatest way to building generational wealth is home ownership. Mm-hmm. And we think about the majority of ways that people are doing that or purchasing homes is through their employment, right? So it actually does seem to make sense, even though we don't usually put together how corporations can really assist in promoting home ownership among employees.
It's interesting, and I kind of thought about that and tossed it around, and what I've come up with, particularly for the purposes of this show, is I think the thing that employees could do is, the most important thing, in my opinion, is pay their employees a livable wage. I think that's number one. And then two, and I reference that in the context of teachers. Teachers just sort of are my point of reference for everything. And I say that because I think it's unconscionable that we pay our frontline soldiers, because you don't get a soldier to go and fight in the war in Afghanistan or any of those things if you don't have a teacher who's taught him or her and prepared them for that line of work.
Right.
But to have teachers in our society that can't afford to purchase a home if they so desire, to me is just unconscionable. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's where we start at. Like, how do we put people that are frontline professionals in positions, and how do we raise their income up to a level that allows them to be able to go and purchase a home? If you think about, kind of where we are relative to the price of homes right now. Mm-hmm. The average home in Duval County right now is somewhere near $300,000. Mm-hmm. Well, you could be a teacher and have, a single teacher and have been teaching for, 10 years, and your salary still does not equate to enough to afford a home. Mm-hmm. And that, to me, is problematic. So I think that we have to look at who we are as a society and sort of balance, home ownership and how do we help people get there. And again, I lean into this idea of a livable wage, and how do we help those people who want one get one.
And I think one of the things is we don't really talk about wages correctly in this country, if you ask me, because I think we tend to talk about it in terms of the extremes, right? We talk about, those people who are making bukus of money, the Bill Gates of the world. And then we talk about people who are homeless and who are living on the streets, who are unemployed, don't have jobs. And those two extremes both need their attention. So I'm not taking away from that. However, I don't think we talk about that group of people who are working full-time jobs or multiple part-time jobs, who cannot afford basic needs of life, right? That ALICE, that asset limited, income constrained, but employed group of people. And when you look at people who are living below the poverty line and that ALICE group, it's almost half of the folks in Duval County, right?
I agree with you. And, but that's that difficult conversation. And somehow we have found a way to sort of maneuver our way around, livable wages. We found a way to maneuver our way around having conversations around race. All of those things that bring some level of discomfort. Mm-hmm. We have found a way to not have real meaningful conversations around that. And that's on us. Mm-hmm. And that's on us as a collective, mm-hmm. In my opinion. But you're absolutely correct, is that we it's easy for us to have a conversation about the worker who works at Walmart, and not that anything's wrong with that, but it's not easy for us to have a conversation around the person who works at Walmart, who has to work at Walmart by night and work at Starbucks by day, or has to teach at our local middle school by day and Walmart at night. We don't have a conversation around that because that's uncomfortable. That makes us look at what are we doing as a society, or what are we saying to folks, who we are as a society. And so you're absolutely right again about we don't have conversations. It's easier to have conversations about those folks who are on the extreme of both ends. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a really important conversation that we have to start having. And so as employers look at DEI, and for me, this is an equity issue, mm-hmm. right? I agree. One of the first things you really need to look at is what you're paying people. And I know a lot of times the first thing is, we can't pay people that much. I'm going, but you may have to do some reallocation.
And I agree with you. I mean, I don't, I fundamentally have an issue when at the top of the employment chart, or the employer chart, that person is making 1,000 times more than the person at the bottom of the employee chart. Right. To me, that's a fundamental imbalance, particularly when, your equity in the organization has been nothing more than maybe your intellect. It's not your family's company. We're not talking about, hey, my father started this company. We're talking about somebody who was hired and maybe worked their way up in the company. So when you have that level of inequity within the organization, that to me is problematic. Again, but I think it should be a closer balance there.
Right.
And, these are just my opinions. But I think that we live in a society, or we have grown to be a society where these equity gaps are okay with a lot of us until the issues that those equity gaps bring into our everyday lives. When we walk around and, again, we see, our post people living inside of their cars because they can't afford a place to live in communities like Seattle, or we see, again, teachers having multiple jobs simply to afford a place to live, and that's an issue throughout our country. I think those are challenges that we have to ask ourselves, what are we doing here?
Right. And again, what are we prioritizing? And,
Well, it's obvious what we are prioritizing.
Well, we don't want to say that.
Right.
Because people will tell you, we prioritize people. Your actions say otherwise.
Exactly. You are exactly right. I was giving a speech recently in St. Augustine, and I was asked to talk about affordable housing. And, I said to them, technically the definition of affordable housing is nothing more than safe and decent. I said somehow we've conflated affordable with low income.
Right.
And whenever you hear we're going to build affordable housing in your neighborhood, you get people, no matter where they are on the economic chain, to come out and say, no, we don't want affordable housing. And I said, to me, that's unconscionable. But we do want affordable housing when that grandkid is not able to live in a community in proximity to us.
Right.
Our children have to live clear across the country because they found a smaller community that they can live in. Now we want to screen for affordable housing when I can't see my only grandkid.
Right.
So again, we have to really be honest with ourselves around, we have become very me-centered. And me-centered means more for me until it becomes that person that I'm saying I want more for happens not to be me. It happens to be my child or somebody I really, really, really care about.
All right. So if we think about this, and so we're saying that, we can get into the affordable housing issue all day, because especially here in Florida.
Right.
And across the country, we've seen the rates jump over the past couple of years. It's just been astronomical. Right. And incomes have not met that same rate of increase. Right. And so you've got a lot more people who are really challenged to find housing. A lot more people who can't afford their housing. We've got a housing crisis going on in this country right now. And so as we think about companies playing a role in that, obviously we said pay people a livable wage. And the livable wage really does have to represent what the current society is. I was talking to some people who were formerly incarcerated. And they said when they got out of prison, they gave them a new outfit and $50. And I was like, so they're paying you in 1942 money? Because what are you doing with $50 other than getting a bus ticket to somewhere? You can't get a hotel room. You can't get started. You can't do anything with $50. But there was no adjustment made to that amount based on what it cost in 2023, 2024.
And I think it's very easy to be punitive until, again, the person you're being punitive to is somebody you love. And so the masses of people don't see the humanity in people who are returning citizens. So it's easy to say, I don't want my money to go towards that.
Right.
And that's the work that we have to do. We have to put in the work, whether you're a corporation, whether you are an individual, to see the humanity in other folks. Mm-hmm. We're having this conversation around housing. You have to see the humanity in your employees to say, what is it that I need to do as an organization so that if that is my employees' desire, we as an organization are prepared to help them get there. Is it a simple answer? No, but, neither was coming up with a vaccine for COVID either.
Right.
You have to be prepared to put in the work, and those things that we care about, we put in the work to it. And it can't just be at the end of the day how much money we're going to return back to our shareholders, because generally, 7 out of 10 times your shareholders aren't any other people that work for your organization.
Right.
Or they don't look like the people who work for your organization.
Right.
So, how do we see the humanity in them and put them in a place so that they could be contributing members to our society?
Right. Well, and it's just like in the book Nuts, Herb Kellerman was saying that, the customers aren't number one. The employees are number one. Because if I treat the employees like they're number one, they'll treat the customers like they're number one. And so who are you valuing? I think lots of times we look to shareholders and say we make decisions based on how they're going to respond. But if you really treat and work with your employees and they're giving you all that they have because of the loyalty and the fact that they feel like this is a family and they're really invested and they know you care about them, you're still going to get that return that the shareholders will see.
Well, I think we live in a society where all you have to do is look at Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. They are an example of that. I've never gone there, no matter whether it's cold outside or hot outside. Mm-hmm. You get an experience, and the lines that form around the building, whether it's in the morning or in the evening, mm-hmm. is when they're open, are indicative of the fact that treat your employees right, they're going to treat your customers right, and that's going to have a windfall effect for you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, so in addition to paying someone a livable wage, so let's say we have an organization and they're like, okay, we've looked at our wages, mm-hmm. we have addressed this, we've got everybody at a livable wage status in our organization. So what are some other things, though, that companies can do to assist employees in becoming homeowners or promoting that with their employees?
I think, I'm very big on staying in your lane and doing mm-hmm. what it is that you allege that you do as an organization well. I wouldn't want, again, since I mentioned Chick-fil-A earlier, I wouldn't want Chick-fil-A necessarily being in the home buyer's lane. I mm-hmm. think that, what organizations can do, if that's a desire of their employee, make the resources available. You don't have to own any of the processes because you are a widget manufacturer.
Right.
And you want to make the best widgets available. But if you understand that these things are important to your employees, make the services available. Leverage relationships with those institutions that you do banking with and say, hey, home ownership is important to my employees. A good chunk of my employees have suggested that they want to be homeowners one day. We do banking with you guys. I would love for you all to send somebody out, and we'll have and make that person available in the lunchroom or, during lunch hours to talk about home ownership. I think those types of services, simply making them available and leveraging the relationships that you have mm-hmm. out there based upon things that you do every day, are important to make available to your employees if they've identified that as a thing.
Right.
Hey, we want to make sure every employee is bankable. We don't want employees knowingly working for us that are unbanked. So we're going to have the bank that we bank with come out and set up and have their that make that service available to their employees. I just think those are the extra steps that companies can do to retain good employees by listening to them and then responding to things that they desire to have for themselves. And again, home ownership is just one of those things that, you can set up a table in the break room and say, hey, we want to make sure that our employees get the best rates available. Well, if you got, $2-3 million in the bank, guess what that bank is going to do? Make sure your employees get the best rates available.
Right.
So I think that's how you address the issue of what can a company do. Leverage the relationships that they have external, that really they have some leverage to, and bring the windfall of those relationships back to their employees.
And I would tie to that, because you mentioned it, this is also getting that information from your employees about what kinds of things that they need.
Absolutely.
Right? Because, for instance, you may have people who really are first-time home buyers and have no idea what that process is like. You may have people who really need to repair their credit. You may have people who just don't even have a bank or don't even know where to start.
That's right.
And you also may have some people, you know what? Home ownership is great, but let's also get a couple of other things, because, for instance, we need you to have a few dollars in an account for an emergency fund before we start talking about down payment on a home.
Right.
So, really tapping into where your employees are, what they need, what their information is. And that could be setting up a lunch and learn, or somebody in the break room. That could be putting links on the employee website, and you can go here and get more information. There's all kinds of ways to leverage those relationships if you know what they need.
But I think that we have gotten so far removed between the top of the employment pyramid to the bottom of the employment pyramid that, again, we don't see the humanity in our employees. We just see them as widgets.
Right.
Interchangeable widgets.
Right.
And I would venture to say that those employers who see their employees as more than just interchangeable widgets are generally the ones who get the quality employees, who go above and beyond what they're supposed to do for an organization. And that's how you get the quality that you want. But again, the gap between here and here is so wide that we don't even have conversations around what is it that my lower level employees need in order to be whole. And it might be something very small.
Right.
It might be something very small, but I think we have accepted this model of the Amazon model. And this is no knock or shade to Amazon, but we've accepted that model of, I'm here and you work for me, and I don't need to know your name or anything that way.
Well, they've got a whole TV series based on that, right? Like Undercover Boss, where they're going and they're working in these jobs, and they had no idea that life is like that for the people who work for them.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So that distance between the top level of management and the folks who are boots on the ground it seems to be widening, and we also seem to be very accepting of that.
Right. But I think that we not only are accepting of that in our employment, we're accepting of that in our houses of worship. I mean, we are accepting of that in all aspects of our lives. And what that does, in my opinion, is it makes us sort of mechanical. When I was working on my doctorate, one of the things that I asked the people was, what are your expectations of your minister? And I was floored at how many people said nothing. They had the same expectations of their ministers as they did the CEOs of their organization. They didn't expect to have a relationship with the ministers. And neither do people who work in organizations. They don't expect to be seen. And to me, that makes us very robotic in how we go about our work. So it's not personal. It's just, I work for organization X.
Right.
I know his name, but I don't expect to have a relationship with him.
Right.
Or
well,
her.
that also gives you a replaceable mindset.
Right.
If you don't know me, I'm just person A, well, then I can easily be person B and you wouldn't even know the difference.
Right.
So then what's my investment here?
Right.
And so when we talk and we look at the attrition rates for people, we look at, this great resignation we had, how much of that is behind, well, did you have a relationship with people? Did you
Right.
know what their needs were? And were you trying to